The fishing line was cutting through the morning fog, cool and still, when Cordelia Vane's heels clicked closer across my weathered dock. "Your little fishing shack is drowning our estates, Thorne," she announced, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. "Time you learned what real property owners can do." Behind her, 5 board members in matching salmon-pink blazers advanced like an army of corporate flamingos, clipboards raised like weapons, court orders rustling in the river breeze. They honestly thought this water belonged to them, the current lapping against century-old pilings my grandfather hammered into federal soil during the Great Depression. What Cordelia didn't know was that I spent 12 years mapping waterways for the Army Corps of Engineers, that my office used to be 3 doors down from the U.S. Attorney for Water Rights, or that I could recite the Federal Navigation Servitude Act of 1789 in my sleep. But she was about to learn why you don't sue someone who treats the Constitution like a fishing buddy. My rod didn't waver as I cast again, the weighted hook sailing past their patrol boat that had been circling for the past hour. The deputy aboard looked distinctly uncomfortable, probably wondering why he was enforcing HOA complaints on waters that predated the Louisiana Purchase. I checked the depth gauge mounted on the dock post. 14 feet, 2 inches, exactly what the federal charts showed for navigable depth requirements. The brass Corps of Engineers ring on my right hand caught the morning light as I reeled in slowly, methodically, like nothing in the world mattered more than the catfish hiding in these federal waters. "Mr. Garrison," Cordelia announced, her voice a trumpet blast. "You've been served." She snapped her fingers, and one of her pink-blazered minions stepped forward with an envelope thick as a phone book. The woman's hands shook slightly. That must be Eleanor Whitmore, the new treasurer, who inherited the position when her husband passed last spring. She kept glancing at the water gauge, then at the federal marker post, then back at Cordelia. Smart woman. She's already figured out something's profoundly wrong with this picture. "Negligent water management," Cordelia continued, pulling out a mock check the size of a restaurant menu. $2.8 million in flood damages. The vote was unanimous. Behind her, Harold Vane, no relation, despite the name, but definitely related to the problem, shifted his weight and studied his shoes. The HOA secretary hadn't looked me in the eye once since they arrived. Interesting. I set my rod in the holder and finally turned to face them properly. Survey equipment filled my truck bed, theodolites, GPS units, water flow meters, all clearly marked with Corps certification stickers. A stack of blue federal maps covered my dashboard, their edges yellowed, but their authority eternal. "Says here in our research that you were discharged from the Corps," Cordelia said, tapping her clipboard with a manicured nail painted the exact shade of her blazer. "Retired with full honors," I corrected, taking the thick envelope from Eleanor. "Different thing entirely, like the difference between federal jurisdiction and whatever fantasy you're peddling." The construction equipment upstream caught my eye, fresh yellow paint gleaming where there should be a natural riverbank. Fresh concrete glowed white against the brown earth. Someone had been busy narrowing the channel, forcing water to run faster, deeper, angrier. The flood wasn't an accident. It was engineered. "The preliminary vote has already passed," Cordelia said, mistaking my silence for defeat. "Your negligence in maintaining proper water barriers caused millions in damage to Azure Creek estates." I pulled out my phone and started taking photos. The construction equipment, the narrowed channel, the fresh concrete, the federal markers, and especially the nervous faces of the HOA board. "Federal property since the Louisiana Purchase," I said quietly. "You might want to Google that before your next vote." The deputy on the patrol boat touched his radio, probably calling his supervisor. He knew something Cordelia didn't. Federal waters mean federal jurisdiction, and HOA votes mean exactly nothing here. Harold Vane finally spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Cordelia, maybe we should." "Should what?" She whirled on him, pink blazer flaring. "Let this man destroy our community? Look at the damage." She gestured dramatically upstream, where Azure Creek Estate sat. Basements flooded, foundations cracked, property values plummeting. What she didn't mention was the development that went up last year on the floodplain. The one that required mysteriously amended permits and lost surveys. The one owned by Vane Development, LLC. I'd seen the license plates on the trucks working at midnight 3 weeks ago, right before the spring floods hit. "Your community is built on a federal floodplain," I pointed out, opening the envelope. The lawsuit was even more ridiculous than I expected. Negligent maintenance of private waterways, failure to install modern flood controls, intentional direction of water toward residential properties. They were literally suing me for a flood on property I don't own, caused by modifications they made themselves. The marina owner from downstream, Sterling Hayes, motored up in his John boat, pretending to check crab traps, but really eavesdropping. Good. I'll need witnesses. Sterling's been here 40 years. He's watched the river change. Watched the HOA slowly strangle the waterway with their improvements. Mr. Garrison, Eleanor Whitmore started suddenly, then stopped when Cordelia shot her a look that could freeze blood. Yes, Eleanor, I encouraged, noting how she flinched at her first name. She knows something. Cordelia stepped closer. You have 30 days to pay, or we proceed with criminal charges. She held my gaze. Negligent homicide if any deaths occurred, which thankfully they didn't. The audacity was calculated. You know what? I set the envelope on my tackle box. I think I'll take this to my old office buddies at the Corps. They love a good laugh. Cordelia's face shifted from triumphant to uncertain. What old office buddies? Instead of answering, I pulled out a weathered federal map from 1952. See this blue line? That's federal jurisdiction. See this marker? I pointed to the brass post. Unchanged since 1887. You're standing on property controlled by the Federal Navigation Servitude Act. That's impossible, she snapped, but her voice wavered. Security footage from the marina, I continued, nodding towards Sterling, who tipped his baseball cap, shows interesting midnight activity 3 weeks ago. 3 figures in HOA blazers near the floodgates. License plate, Vane Development, LLC. Harold went white as his dress shirt. Sterling tied off his boat and climbed onto the dock, casual as Sunday morning. Morning, Thorne. Are these folks bothering you? Just serving me papers for their own crime, I replied. Funny thing about that flood, Sterling said, pulling out a manila folder from his boat. I got emails here from 2019 where I warned the HOA about that channel narrowing. Told them it would cause exactly what happened. They told me to mind my own business. Eleanor Whitmore gasped softly. Harold looked like he might faint. Those emails mean nothing, Cordelia declared. Water from federal property, I corrected. Water that was intentionally channeled by illegal modifications to the riverbank. Modifications that require federal permits you never obtained. We had county approval. Harold protested weakly. Sterling laughed, a sharp bark that sent a pair of ducks flying. The county can't approve federal waterway modifications. Might as well ask your HOA to approve changes to the Constitution. The deputy on the patrol boat was openly listening now. Here's something else, Sterling continued, warming to his theme. Insurance companies have been asking questions. Seems like flooding a development built on a floodplain might be profitable if you're looking for a payout. That's slander, Cordelia shrieked. No, I said calmly. Slander is claiming I caused a flood when you narrowed the channel. Truth is just truth. Eleanor Whitmore suddenly dropped her clipboard. As she bent to retrieve it, she whispered something that sounded like 1789. She knew about the Federal Navigation Servitude Act. Tell you what, I said, picking up my fishing rod again. You go have your meeting, but know this. Every document, every email, every midnight modification to that riverbank is being documented. And my friends at the Corps, they don't take kindly to people messing with federal waterways. Cordelia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. For the first time, she looked uncertain. They retreated in formation, heels clicking on wood that remembered floods from before the HOA existed. You knew this was coming, Sterling said after they were gone. They created the flood, Sterling. Then they decided to blame me for it. Can you prove it? I smiled for the first time all morning. I've got something better than proof. I've got federal law, security footage, and a paper trail they don't know exists. I studied the envelope full of lies. They assumed I was just some retired nobody with a fishing dock. They never bothered to check what I did for those 12 years at the Corps. Never wondered why I chose this particular piece of riverside property. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. They're planning something bigger. Watch your back. Eleanor Whitmore, the nervous treasurer. The HOA wasn't as united as Cordelia thought. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. Army Corps of Engineers, Water Rights Division. Beckett, it's Thorne Garrison. Thorne, heard you retired to go fishing. I did, but the fishing just got interesting. How'd you like to investigate some federal waterway violations? How serious? Illegal modifications, channel narrowing, intentional flooding, and now a fraudulent lawsuit claiming the federal government's water is my responsibility. Beckett whistled. Send me everything. We'll have people there by tomorrow. There's more, I added. I think it's insurance fraud. They flooded their own development to trigger payouts. Holy, he caught himself. That's FBI territory. I know. That's why I'm calling you first. I drove to the Azure Creek Community Center where the meeting was scheduled. It sat on filled wetlands, a glass and steel monument to suburban ambition. I didn't go inside immediately. I walked around to the maintenance area where the storm drains emptied. Instead of a retention pond, I found freshly poured concrete channels directing water away from the development and toward the narrowed river channel. The concrete was the same mix I saw upstream. My phone camera clicked steadily, documenting every angle, every violation of water management codes. You shouldn't be here, Harold Vanes said, walking up, sweat beading on his forehead. It's public property, Harold. He glanced around nervously. It's not just about the flood. It's bigger. The development, the insurance, all of it. Marcus Vane, my brother, he owns the development company. He needed the insurance money. The development's underwater financially, as well as literally. So you engineer a flood, blame the nearest scapegoat, collect the insurance, and probably sue me for damages to double dip. You can't prove anything, Harold whispered. I don't have to. The FBI will. The Corps of Engineers will. Every federal agency you've never thought about will crawl through your records like ants at a picnic. I tried to stop it, Harold stumbled backward. But Marcus has connections. Judge Vane, our cousin, he's already agreed to expedite the case. Now that's interesting, I said. A corrupt judge in the family. The conspiracy grows. Before Harold could answer, Marcus Vane himself stood in the doorway, 6 feet of entitled developer, and I noticed the slight bulge under his jacket. He was armed. Mr. Garrison, you're trespassing. Leave now. After I attend the public portion of the HOA meeting, I replied. I have some comments about federal jurisdiction your members might find interesting. I walked past him into the main hall. 300 faces turned toward me. Cordelia's face cycled through surprise, anger, and then a smile sharp as winter ice. The man responsible for flooding your homes has decided to join us. I walked to the public comment microphone, pulled out my laminated federal map, and waited. Good morning. I'm Thorne Garrison, and I'm here to inform you that your HOA board is lying to you. The room exploded, but I waited until curiosity won over outrage. I laid out the facts. The federal jurisdiction since 1789, the security camera footage of Vane Development LLC's trucks at midnight, Sterling's ignored 2019 warnings, and the illegal channel narrowing. Cordelia shrieked. Those are fabrications. Then Eleanor Whitmore stood up, shaking but determined. No, they're not. I've seen the emails. I've seen the permits that were altered. I've seen the insurance policies that were increased just 2 months before the flood. We caused this. We flooded our own community for the insurance money. The room went silent. Marcus moved fast for a big man, but Sterling and 2 other marina workers I hadn't noticed step out of the crowd and block him. Sit down, Marcus. The lady's talking. Eleanor pulled out a flash drive. This contains every email, every altered document, every piece of evidence that we engineered this flood and tried to blame Mr. Garrison. Suddenly, the wall lights up with emails. Melody Whitmore, Eleanor's daughter, plugged her laptop into the projection system. The first email makes the crowd gasp. From Cordelia to Marcus, create the flooding upstream. Blame Garrison. Federal investigation is unlikely if we move fast. Judge Vane will expedite. The next, flood needs to happen before the end of March for fiscal year claims. Make sure the channel work is complete by then. Turn that off. Cordelia shrieked, lunging for the laptop. Then the audio starts playing. The federal government doesn't care about one river in Colorado. Even if they did, my lawsuit will be settled before they notice. What about Garrison? He's nobody. Harold Vane finally broke, crying in front of 300 neighbors. They helped me. They said if I didn't, they'd ruin my business. Shut up, Harold, Marcus roared. Walter Henshaw, an elderly resident, stood up slowly. I watched this creek flow naturally until you people started improving it. My basement flooded because of your greed, not because of Mr. Garrison. You flooded us on purpose. I held up my hand for quiet. There's more. The Army Corps of Engineers will be here tomorrow. The FBI has been notified about the insurance fraud and that expedited hearing with Judge Vane. Marcus finally broke free and charged toward me, but he didn't make it 3 steps before the sheriff's deputies arrived. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number, putting it on speaker. Army Corps of Engineers, Special Investigations. This is Thorne Garrison. I'm at Azure Creek Estates Community Center with 300 witnesses to admissions of federal waterway violations and insurance fraud. We're already en route, Mr. Garrison. Federal marshals are with us. Estimated arrival, 8 minutes. Cordelia collapsed into a chair. Marcus was restrained. Eleanor Whitmore looked at me, tears streaming down her face. My husband suspected something was wrong. He was gathering evidence when he had his heart attack. I don't think it was natural causes. The room went silent. This isn't their first time, Melody announced, pulling up a document. They did this in Arizona 5 years ago, flooding a development they built on a wash. 3 people died in that one. Walter Henshaw spoke into the silence. I motioned for immediate dissolution of this HOA board and criminal investigation of all members. The federal marshals arrived like cavalry. Deputy U.S. Marshal Catherine Cross surveyed the room. We have warrants for Cordelia Vane, Marcus Vane, and Judge Vane on charges of conspiracy to defraud the federal government, destruction of federal property, insurance fraud, and violation of the Clean Water Act. Marshal Cross turned to me. Mr. Garrison, we'll need your complete files. It's copied and ready. I replied, handing her a drive containing 5 years of documentation. You were expecting this. I was hoping to prevent it, I said. But when I saw them narrowing the channel, I knew where it would lead. The flood, the blame, the lawsuit, it was all predictable. The final card wasn't played at the meeting. It was played on my dock at sunset. I was back on the dock hours later, tiny microphone taped to my chest, fishing rod in hand. FBI agents were hidden in the tree line. I knew Cordelia had made bail and was coming here. She arrived in a rental car, looking utterly defeated. She was carrying a gas can, planning to burn the evidence she thought I had. Cordelia? I asked without turning around. She froze. She pulled out a gun. You think you're so clever. Actually, I turned to face her. It's been 15 years. What? 15 years since your father tried the same scheme in Nevada. Killed a family of 4 when he flooded their property. The Weatherb family. My sister. Her husband. Their 2 kids. Amanda Weatherb Garrison. Look it up. Your father murdered them for insurance money. Just like you murdered Timothy Whitmore. Her face went white. The gun shook in her hand. You set us up. This whole thing was a setup. No, Cordelia. You set yourselves up the moment you decided to repeat your father's crimes. I just bought property downstream and waited. You bought this place specifically to catch us. I bought every property downstream from Vane developments in 5 states. I confessed. Shell companies, trusts, different names. And I waited. Knew eventually you'd try what your father taught you. That's not entrapment. That's patience. The red laser dots appeared on her back. FBI snipers in position. Your brother Harold told us everything. I continued. The other developments, the judge, the network of corrupt contractors. It's over. You ruined me, she screamed. You ruined yourself the moment you narrowed that channel. I lowered my voice. I'm the brother of Amanda Weatherb. I'm the federal investigator who's been documenting your family's crimes for 15 years. And right now, I'm the only person who can tell the FBI you surrendered peacefully. The gun dropped an inch, then another. Finally, she let it fall to the dock. 15 years, she whispered as they led her away. You waited 15 years. My sister was worth it, I replied. The trials began 6 months later. Cordelia received 40 years for murder conspiracy, insurance fraud, and federal property destruction. Marcus received 50 years. Judge Vane was impeached and sentenced to 30 years. My whistleblower share went into a trust for families affected by engineered floods. My real victory, though, was seeing the federal machinery at work. The illegal channel modifications were reversed immediately. The Timothy Whitmore Memorial Library was established, run by Eleanor, teaching residents about riparian rights. I still fish from my dock every morning. The river whispers its ancient story, unchanged by human drama, eternal as federal law. I found my peace, not in quiet isolation, but in the quiet, methodical application of justice. The river doesn't judge. It just flows, federal and free, forever beyond the reach of those who would claim it. Cordelia learned the hard way that some waters run deeper than HOA bylaws, all the way to the Constitution. So here's my question for you. Knowing the stakes were national conspiracy and murder, does that change your view on the HOA's petty behavior at the beginning? And if you were Thorne, could you have waited 15 years for justice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Drop a scales of justice emoji if you agree that water always wins. Like and subscribe for more stories about federal smackdowns.